Dr. Sarah Chen pulled her coffee mug closer to her chest as she stared at the computer screen. The numbers dancing across the monitor made no sense. She had been working at the radio telescope facility for 12 years, and she had never seen anything like this. The night shift was usually quiet. Most people thought listening for signals from space was boring work. Sarah knew better. Every night brought new mysteries from the stars. Radio waves from distant galaxies, pulses from spinning neutron stars, and the constant whisper of cosmic. Background radiation filled her headphones. But tonight was different. "Computer, run the analysis again," she said to the machine. The artificial intelligence voice responded in its calm tone. "Analysis complete. Signal shows intelligent design patterns. Source unknown. Direction not toward Earth." Sarah sat up straighter in her chair. She had found something that was not meant for human ears. The signal had appeared 3 hours ago, during her routine scan of the Vega sector. At first, she thought it was interference from a satellite, but the pattern was too complex, too organized. It pulsed in mathematical sequences that suggested meaning. The signal was weak, barely above the background noise of space, but it was definitely artificial. She called her supervisor, Dr. James Park, even though it was past midnight. "Sarah, this better be important," came his sleepy voice through the phone. "Jim, I think we have something. A signal. It looks like a transmission between 2 points in space, and we just happened to catch it." There was silence on the other end, then the sound of Dr. Park getting out of bed. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't touch anything." While she waited, Sarah studied the signal more carefully. The transmission was not random. It had structure, like language. Parts of it repeated, suggesting important information. Other sections showed mathematical constants that any intelligent species would recognize. The number pi appeared several times, along with prime number sequences. But what worried Sarah most was the tone of the signal. Even without understanding the language, she could sense urgency in the transmission patterns. The signal repeated the same information over and over, like someone shouting for help. Dr. Park arrived with 2 other scientists from the project. Dr. Lisa Martinez was their linguistics expert, and Dr. Raj Patel specialized in signal analysis. They gathered around Sarah's workstation as she played the recording. "How long has it been transmitting?" Dr. Martinez asked. "About 3 hours of active signal. But look at this." Sarah pointed to another part of her screen. "The computer detected traces of the same signal pattern in our archived data. It's been going on for weeks, maybe months. We just never noticed because it was so weak." Dr. Patel studied the frequency analysis. "This is definitely not from Earth. The carrier wave shows characteristics that our technology doesn't produce. And the power source." He paused, running calculations. "The amount of energy needed to send this signal across interstellar distances is enormous. Whatever is sending this message is using technology we can barely imagine." The team worked through the night, trying to understand what they had found. As the hours passed, the signal grew weaker. By dawn, it had faded to almost nothing. "It's stopping," Sarah said, watching the strength indicators drop. Dr. Martinez looked at the data. "Not stopping, moving. The source is in motion and it's moving away from us. We're losing the signal because of distance and orbital mechanics. They had captured 17 hours of transmission before it faded completely." The team spent the next day analyzing every second of the recording. What they found changed everything. The signal contained 3 distinct types of information. The first part was mathematical, universal constants and geometric proofs that any technological civilization would understand. This was clearly meant to establish intelligence and provide a translation key. The second part was more complex. It appeared to be coordinate data, describing locations in 3-dimensional space using the galaxy's center as a reference point. Dr. Patel's calculations showed that the coordinates pointed to star systems hundreds of light years away. The third part was the most mysterious. It consisted of complex waveforms that suggested emotional content, what Dr. Martinez called linguistic music. The patterns rose and fell like speech, but with harmonics that human voices could never produce. "It's definitely a message from one intelligent species to another," Dr. Martinez explained to the growing team of experts who had joined the project. "But here's what's strange. The signal was sent on a very narrow beam, precisely aimed at one of those coordinate locations. We only detected it because our radio telescope happened to be in the path of the beam at exactly the right moment." Dr. Park leaned back in his chair. "So we accidentally intercepted someone else's mail." "More than that," Sarah said, pointing to the signal analysis. "Look at the power output and the repetition patterns. This isn't casual communication. This is an emergency broadcast." The implications hit the team like a cold wave. They had intercepted a distress call that was never meant for human ears. Somewhere in the galaxy, an intelligent species was in trouble, sending desperate messages to distant locations. Word of the discovery spread quickly through the scientific community. Within a week, teams from around the world were working to decode the message. The world's most advanced computers and artificial intelligence systems joined the effort. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiology expert from the European Space Agency, flew in to join the team. "If this is really an alien distress call, we need to understand everything we can about who sent it and what kind of trouble they're in." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Martinez's 12-year-old daughter, Maria, was visiting the facility for a school project. While the adults worked on complex linguistic algorithms, Maria noticed something simpler. "Mom, why? Do some parts of the signal sound sad?" Dr. Martinez paused her work. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Listen to this part." Maria pointed to a section of the recording. "It sounds like crying. And this part sounds angry. And this part—" She played another section. "This part sounds like saying goodbye." The emotional content in the signal became the key to understanding its meaning. The aliens were not just sending coordinates and mathematical data. They were sending feelings: fear, desperation, love, and loss. Working with this insight, the team began to decode the message piece by piece. The mathematical section established basic concepts. The coordinate data showed specific locations, but the emotional content told a story that chilled everyone who heard it. The signal was a warning. An advanced species was telling their distant colonies that danger was coming. The mathematical sections included countdown timers and velocity calculations. The coordinate data showed the location of the threat and the path it would take. The emotional content carried messages from families who knew they would never see each other again. "They're dying," Dr. Martinez said quietly as the team reviewed their translation. "Whoever sent this message, their world is ending. They're warning their colonies that the same threat is coming for them." Sarah stared at the data scrolling across her screen. In the cold mathematics and alien harmonics, she could see the final moments of a civilization. A species that had achieved interstellar communication was facing extinction, and their last act was to warn others of their kind. "How long do they have?" Dr. Park asked. Dr. Patel ran the calculations based on the velocity data in the message. "If we're reading this correctly, whatever threat destroyed the message senders will reach the colony locations in approximately 7 Earth years." The room fell silent. Somewhere in the galaxy, innocent beings were living their lives, unaware that death was racing toward them through the void. They might never receive the warning that their homeworld had died trying to send. Dr. Vasquez spoke first. "We have to do something." "Like what?" Dr. Park asked. "We don't even know where these colonies are exactly, and even if we did, our fastest ships would take hundreds of years to reach them. But we know someone is out there," Sarah said. "We know they're in danger. We can't just ignore this." The debate that started in that small control room would soon spread around the world. Humanity had accidentally overheard the death cry of an alien civilization. The message was never meant to be heard by human ears, but now that they had heard, what was their responsibility? As news of the discovery leaked to the media, people everywhere asked the same questions. Should humanity try to help beings they had never met? Could they even help? And what would happen if they tried? The intercepted message had opened a door that could never be closed. Humanity now knew they were not alone in the universe. They also knew that the galaxy could be a dangerous place, where entire civilizations could be erased without warning. In the days that followed, as governments and scientists debated what to do, Sarah often returned to listen to the original recording. In the alien harmonics and mathematical precision, she heard something that transcended species and distance, the universal language of hope and desperation. Someone had reached across the void to warn others of danger. Now humanity faced a choice that would define their species forever. They had heard the message that was never meant for them. The question was, what would they do about it? The signal from space had stopped, but its impact on humanity was just beginning. In radio telescopes around the world, scientists continued to search for more transmissions, hoping to learn more about the species that had trusted the universe with their final words. And in the growing team of experts working to decode every nuance of the message, a new understanding was emerging. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but it was also full of intelligence and compassion. The dying aliens had used their last moments, not for revenge or despair, but to protect others. It was a lesson that humanity would need to remember in the difficult days ahead. The emergency meeting at the United Nations building in New York brought together the brightest minds from every continent. For 3 weeks, teams of linguists, mathematicians, and computer scientists had worked around the clock to decode the alien message. What they had discovered made the room feel heavy with sorrow. Dr. Martinez stood at the front of the assembly hall, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to reveal. Behind her, massive screens showed the decoded sections of the transmission. Ladies and gentlemen, we now understand what we intercepted. The message comes from a species that calls themselves the Keth Var. Based on the mathematical references in their communication, they are an aquatic species from a water world approximately 400 light-years from Earth. She clicked to the next slide, showing a star map with marked locations. The Keth Var had established colonies on 3 different worlds. The message we intercepted was sent from their homeworld to these colonies. It was their final transmission. Murmurs filled the room as the translation appeared on screen. The words were simple, but their meaning was devastating. To our children among the distant stars, our world dies today. The Devourers have found us. We have 7 cycles to prepare you for what comes. We send you our knowledge, our love, and our warning. Do not mourn us. Live. Dr. Park took over the presentation. The beings they call Devourers are what we believe to be a silicon-based life form. According to the data in the message, they travel from system to system, consuming all organic matter on inhabited worlds. They are not interested in conquest or communication. They simply harvest entire biospheres. The room grew quieter as the implications sank in. An entire species had been wiped out by creatures that saw them as nothing more than food. The mathematical data in the message gives us more details, continued Dr. Park. The Devourers travel in large fleets. They strip mine planets for resources, then move on to the next system. The Keth Var homeworld fought them for several months before falling. The final battle lasted 3 days. Dr. Chen Sarah raised her hand to speak. The most heartbreaking part of the message is the personal content. The Keth Var included what can only be described as family messages in their transmission. The screen changed to show translated text that made many people in the room wipe their eyes. From weaver of currents to small swimmer in distant waters, your first spawning brings joy even in our darkest hour. Know that your offspring carry the song of our people to new seas. Swim well, my child. From the deep thinkers of the northern depths to the colony builders, We have solved the problem of the coral sickness that troubled your reefs. The formula is embedded in mathematical sequence 47b. May your waters always be clear. From all who remain to all who are distant, remember the singing tide ceremony. Remember the taste of home kelp. Remember that the ocean connects all life. We are with you in the current. Dr. Martinez had to pause before continuing. There are hundreds of these personal messages. Parents to children, teachers to students, friends to friends. They knew they were going to die, but they used their final transmission to send love and practical help to their colonies. The Chinese representative spoke first. How much time do the colonies have? Dr. Patel consulted his calculations. Based on the velocity and trajectory data in the message, the Devourer fleet will reach the first Keth Var colony in approximately 7 Earth years. The other 2 colonies will be attacked within the following 2 years. Do the colonies know what's coming? Asked the Brazilian delegate. That's the tragedy, Dr. Martinez replied. We've been monitoring radio frequencies from the direction of the colony worlds. We've detected some signals that match Keth Var communication patterns, but they're very weak. We don't think the colonies ever received the warning message. The homeworld was destroyed before the transmission could be completed and repeated. The Russian representative leaned forward. So we're the only ones who know that 3 entire worlds are about to be destroyed. Yes, said Dr. Park simply. The room erupted in discussion. Some delegates argued that humanity had no business interfering in alien affairs. Others insisted that having the knowledge created a moral obligation to act. The debate continued for hours. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had become the project's coordinator, finally called for quiet. Let me share something else we've learned about the Keth Var. Their technology level appears to be similar to ours, but focused in different areas. They have advanced biological sciences and energy manipulation, but their space travel seems limited to their local system. She showed new slides with technical data. The message includes detailed information about their society. The Keth Var are what we would call pacifists. They have no weapons of war, no military structure. Their entire civilization is based on harmony with their environment. They're scientists, artists, and philosophers. What about the Devourers? Asked the Indian delegate. What do we know about their capabilities? Dr. Patel's expression grew grim. From the Keth Var data, we can estimate that a Devourer fleet consists of at least 50 large vessels, each the size of a small city. They use some form of matter conversion technology to break down planets at the molecular level. Their ships appear to be living organisms themselves, possibly silicon-based. Life forms that have evolved to travel through space. Could humanity fight them? Someone asked. General Patricia Williams, the head of the newly formed Space Defense Initiative, spoke for the first time. Based on the technical data in the alien message, a direct confrontation would be suicide. The Devourers destroyed an entire civilization that had thousands of years to prepare for space travel. Humanity has been in space for less than 100 years. But, she continued, that doesn't mean we're helpless. The Keth Var were pacifists who had never fought a war. Humanity has different strengths. Dr. Martinez clicked to a new section of the decoded message. There's something else. The Keth Var included cultural and scientific databases in their transmission. They literally tried to preserve their entire civilization in that final message. We now have access to 4,000 years of alien science, art, and philosophy. The implications were staggering. The dying Keth Var had given humanity the greatest gift imaginable, the complete knowledge of an advanced alien civilization. Their biological sciences are centuries ahead of ours, Dr. Vasquez explained. They had mastered genetic engineering, ecosystem management, and what they call life shaping, the ability to modify living organisms for specific purposes. Their energy technology is based on principles we're just beginning to understand. Why are you telling us this? Asked the German representative. Because knowledge means responsibility. Dr. Martinez replied. The Keth Var trusted the universe with their legacy. They sent everything they were into the void, hoping someone would find it and remember them. We found it. We are the keepers of their memory now. The French delegate raised an important question. Is there any indication that the Devourers might threaten Earth? Dr. Park nodded grimly. The trajectory data suggests they move through the galaxy in a spiral pattern, consuming systems as they go. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach Earth's region of the galaxy in approximately 200 years. The room fell silent again. The alien threat was not just about distant beings humanity had never met. Eventually, it would become humanity's problem, too. So we have a choice, General Williams said. We can wait 200 years and hope we're strong enough to fight the Devourers when they come for us. Or we can try to stop them now, while they're still far away. Dr. Chen stood up. There's a third option. We can try to warn the Keth Var colonies and help them escape. Escape to where? Asked the Japanese representative. Here, Dr. Chen replied. Earth is in the opposite direction from the Devourer. Advance. If we could contact the colonies and offer them refuge, we could save what's left of their species. The debate that followed would continue for weeks, but already public opinion around the world was forming. The story of the Keth Var had captured human imagination. Here was a peaceful, intelligent species facing extinction, their final act one of love and warning to their distant children. Protest movements sprang up in major cities demanding that humanity act to save the alien colonies. Scientists worked overtime to develop technologies that might help. Engineers designed new spacecraft. Military planners studied the data about Devourer tactics. But it was the personal messages in the Keth Var transmission that moved people most. The alien words of love, hope, and farewell resonated across all human cultures. Parents holding their children thought of Keth Var families separated by death and distance. Teachers reading the alien knowledge gifts thought of Keth Var educators who had spent their final hours preparing lessons for students they would never see again. Dr. Martinez found herself listening to one particular message over and over again. It was from an individual called Current Singer to someone named Wave Rider. My beloved, I know you are building new reefs on the second world. I wish I could see the corals you have shaped, taste the waters you have purified. The younglings here ask about you every day. I tell them you swim in distant seas, but your heart current flows back to us always. When the dark time comes, remember that love travels faster than light, faster than death. In every wave, I am with you. It was beautiful and heartbreaking. The Keth Var faced extinction with grace, thinking not of themselves but of those they loved. They had given their final transmission not to seeking revenge or cursing their fate, but to sending knowledge and love across the void. As the weeks passed and the decoded message revealed more details about Keth Var civilization, humanity began to understand what would be lost if the colonies fell to the Devourers. An entire way of thinking about the universe, a philosophy based on harmony and connection, would disappear forever. The Keth Var saw all life as part of a vast current that flowed through time and space. They believed that every action created ripples that touched distant shores. Their science was based on cooperation rather than conquest, their art on celebration rather than domination. They were, in many ways, what humanity might become if they chose wisdom over war, harmony over hatred. The message that was never meant to be heard had become a mirror, showing humanity both the beauty that existed in the universe and the terrible forces that threatened to destroy it. The question was no longer whether humanity should act, but whether they could act in time. In laboratories around the world, scientists worked to understand Keth Var technology. In shipyards, engineers began building vessels designed for interstellar travel. In military academies, strategists studied the data about Devourer tactics, looking for weaknesses. And in radio telescopes pointing toward distant stars, operators listened for any sign that the Keth High colonies still lived, still sent their harmonious signals into the void, unaware that death was racing toward them through the darkness. The clock was ticking. 7 years to cross impossible distances, make contact with beings humanity had never seen, and find a way to fight an enemy that had already destroyed one advanced civilization. The Keth High message had changed everything. Now it remained to be seen if humanity could change the ending of their story. The global assembly hall buzzed with tension as representatives from every nation on Earth gathered for the most important vote in human history. 6 months had passed since the world learned about the Keth High message, and humanity remained, divided about what to do. President Katherine Morrison of the United States stood at the podium, her voice carrying the weight of the decision before them. We are here to decide whether humanity will attempt to intervene in an alien conflict. The choice we make today will define our species for generations to come. In the gallery above, Dr. Sarah Chen watched with millions of others around the world. The past months had been a whirlwind of scientific discoveries, political debates, and public demonstrations. Everyone had an opinion about humanity's responsibility to the dying Keth High colonies. The debate had split along predictable lines. Some nations argued that Earth's resources should be focused on earthly problems: poverty, climate change, and the ongoing conflicts that plagued humanity. Why risk everything for aliens they had never met? Others insisted that the knowledge of the Keth High's fate created a moral obligation to act. How could humanity call itself civilized if it ignored genocide happening in front of their eyes? Admiral Marcus Torres, the newly appointed head of the United Earth Defense Fleet, presented the military perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, we have spent 6 months analyzing the data from the Keth High transmission. Our conclusions are sobering. He gestured to a holographic display showing the galaxy. The Devourer fleet is massive. Our best estimates suggest 50 to 70 vessels, each capable of planetary destruction. The Keth High homeworld had orbital defenses and energy shields that we can only dream of building. The Devourers destroyed it all in 3 days. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The technical briefings had painted a grim picture of humanity's chances in a direct confrontation. However, Admiral Torres continued, we have advantages the Keth High did not. They were pacifists who had never fought a war. Humanity has unfortunately had plenty of practice with conflict. We understand tactics, strategy, and the element of surprise. Dr. James Park took the stage next, representing the scientific community. The Keth High database has revolutionized our understanding of advanced technology. In 6 months, we have made leaps in energy physics, biological sciences, and space propulsion that would have taken us decades to achieve alone. He showed slides of new technologies being developed around the world. Fusion drives that can accelerate, ships to 10% of light speed, energy shields based on Keth High principles, biological computers that can process information faster than any artificial intelligence we have ever built. But, he emphasized, even with these advances, we cannot match Devourer technology. If we choose to intervene, it will not be a fair fight. The Chinese representative, Ambassador Li Wei, spoke for the opposition. With respect to our colleagues, we must face reality. The Keth High had thousands of years to develop their technology, and they still lost. How can humanity, with less than a century of space experience, hope to succeed where they failed? He stood and addressed the assembly directly. Every ship we send to help the aliens is a ship we cannot use to defend Earth. Every soldier we risk in this venture is a protector we lose for our own planet. The Keth High message tells us that the Devourers will eventually reach our region of space. Should we not focus on preparing for that inevitability rather than throwing away our forces in a hopeless gesture? The Indian representative, Dr. Priya Sharma, countered with passion. Ambassador Lee speaks of hopeless gestures, but I see something different. I see an opportunity for humanity to prove that we are more than just another predator species fighting for resources. She gestured to the translated Kethhi messages displayed around the room. These beings faced extinction with grace and love. Their final act was to warn others and share their knowledge freely. They could have spent their last days seeking revenge or cursing their fate. Instead, they chose to give. Her voice grew stronger. The Kethhi message was never meant for us, but we heard it anyway. Perhaps that was not an accident. Perhaps the universe is testing us, asking what kind of species we choose to be. President Morrison called for order as applause and shouting erupted from the gallery. The public reaction to the Kethhi discovery had been overwhelming. Protests, demanding action, filled streets in major cities. Children drew pictures of the aquatic aliens and asked their parents why no one was helping them. Religious leaders spoke of humanity's duty to protect the innocent, regardless of species. The Brazilian representative, Dr. Carlos Santos, offered a compromise. Perhaps we are thinking about this wrong. We speak of military intervention as if it were our only option. But what if we focused on evacuation instead of confrontation? He presented a new proposal that had emerged from the engineering teams. Our latest fusion drives could reach the nearest Kethhi colony in 4 years if we push the technology to its limits. We could offer to evacuate the colonies to Earth rather than trying to fight the Devourers. The idea had merit, but it raised new questions. How many Kethhi lived in the colonies? Could Earth's ecosystem support an alien species? What if the refugees brought diseases or technologies that proved dangerous? Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the project's chief coordinator, addressed these concerns. Based on the population data in the message, we estimate approximately 50,000 Kethhi living across all 3 colonies. While this seems like a large number, it is manageable given Earth's resources. She showed environmental studies that had been conducted. The Kethhi are aquatic beings who require saltwater environments. Earth's oceans could easily accommodate refugee populations. Their technology is biological rather than industrial, so environmental contamination is unlikely. The session continued for hours as representatives debated every aspect of the proposed mission. The technical challenges were enormous. The moral implications were complex. The political ramifications could reshape international relations on Earth. But throughout the debate, one element remained constant: the haunting beauty of the Kethhi messages. As translators continued their work, more personal communications were decoded and shared with the world. Dr. Martinez read one of the latest translations to the assembly. From deep wisdom of the ancient currents to the young swimmers of the new tides, do not fear the darkness that comes. In the deepest trenches, life still finds a way to sing. We have taught you to shape reefs and guide currents. Now we teach you the final lesson, that love echoes across any distance, through any darkness. Swim toward the light, always toward the light. The room fell silent. In those alien words, every human could hear the universal language of hope struggling against despair. The Russian representative, Colonel Dmitry Volkov, broke the silence. I have been a soldier for 30 years. I have seen what happens when good people do nothing in the face of evil. The Devourers are not just a threat to the Kethhi. They are a threat to all life in the galaxy. He stood and faced his fellow delegates. We debate the cost of action, but what is the cost of inaction? If we let the colonies die without trying to help, what does that say about humanity? If we ignore genocide when we have the power to stop it, how are we different from the monsters? We claim to fight. His words sparked new discussion. Military representatives from various nations began to outline what a joint mission might look like. The technological challenges were daunting, but not impossible. The logistical requirements were massive, but manageable if the entire world cooperated. General Patricia Williams presented the preliminary mission plan. We would need a fleet of 12 ships, 10 for evacuation and 2 for defense. Construction would require resources from every major spacefaring nation. The mission would cost approximately $200 billion and require the cooperation of every space agency on Earth. The number was staggering, but not impossible. The world had spent similar amounts on military conflicts that accomplished far less. "The timeline is tight," she continued. "We have 7 years before the Devourers reach the first colony. Building the fleet will take 3 years. The journey will take 4 years. This leaves no room for error and no time for delays." As the debate continued, reports came in from around the world about public reaction. In Tokyo, students had organized a Swim for the Stars movement, raising money for the rescue mission. In London, engineers worked volunteer hours to design new ship components. In São Paulo, musicians composed symphonies based on Keth Var harmonic patterns. The alien message had touched something deep in human nature, the desire to help others, even at great personal cost. Dr. Sarah Chen was called to testify about the signal detection. As she stood before the assembly, she thought about that night 6 months ago when she first heard the alien transmission. "You ask me why humanity should risk everything for beings we have never met," she said. "I can only tell you what I felt when I first heard their message. In those alien harmonics, I heard something familiar, the sound of intelligent beings who loved their families and wanted to protect them." She paused, looking around the room. The Keth Var could have spent their final transmission on anger or despair. Instead, they chose to send love and knowledge into the void, hoping someone would care enough to listen. Well, someone did listen. We listened. And now we have to decide what kind of species we are. The vote was scheduled for the next day, but the outcome was already becoming clear. Public pressure, moral arguments, and the simple human desire to help others in need had begun to override practical concerns about cost and risk. That evening, as delegates prepared for the final vote, Dr. Martinez received word that her team had decoded another section of the Keth Var message. This one was different from the others. Not a personal communication or technical data, but something that seemed to be addressed to the universe itself. "To any who hear this message in the distant tomorrow, we do not know who you are or where. You swim, but we trust that intelligence breeds compassion across any distance. If you can help our children, please do. If you cannot, please remember us. In all the vast ocean of space, let there be some small current that carries our memory to distant shores." When Dr. Martinez shared this message with the assembly, the next morning the debate effectively ended. Here was a species that had trusted the universe with their final hope, asking not for vengeance but for kindness, not for conquest but for compassion. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would attempt to rescue the Keth Var colonies. The message that was never meant to be heard had become humanity's call to action. In the years that followed, that decision would test everything humans believed, about themselves, about courage, and about what it meant to be truly civilized. But on that day, as representatives from every nation on Earth voted to risk everything for beings they had never met, humanity took its first real step toward becoming the species the Keth Var had trusted them to be. The real work was just beginning. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the blue-green world of Keth Var grow larger on the main screen. 4 years of travel through the void, and they had finally arrived at the first Keth Var colony world. Her heart pounded as she realized she was about to make first contact with an alien species. "Captain, we're receiving signals from the planet," reported Lieutenant Commander James Park, the communications officer and son of Dr. James Park, who had helped decode the original message. "Multiple frequencies, very complex harmonic patterns." "Can you understand any of it?" Elena asked. "Some of it matches the patterns from the homeworld message, but there are new elements. The language seems to have evolved during their isolation." Behind them, Dr. Sarah Chen monitored the long-range sensors. "Captain, I'm detecting approximately 8,000 life signs in underwater cities around the planet. The colony is much smaller than we expected. Elena nodded grimly. The journey from Earth had taken longer than planned. They were arriving, with only 2 years to spare before the Devourer fleet would reach this system. Every day counted now. "Broadcast the message package," Elena ordered. They had spent months preparing for this moment. The message contained mathematical proofs to establish intelligence, followed by excerpts from the original homeworld transmission to prove they had received it. Most importantly, it included the warning about the Devourers and humanity's offer of assistance. The response from the planet came within hours, and it shocked everyone aboard the human ships. The transmission began with mathematical confirmations, then shifted to emotional harmonic patterns that needed no translation. Even humans could recognize the sounds of shock, disbelief, and overwhelming grief. The Keth Var had never received their homeworld's final message. For 4 years, they had been living normal lives, unaware that their parent civilization was dead. Dr. Lisa Martinez, who had led the translation team on Earth, worked frantically to decode the colony's responses. The first translated words from the aliens broke her heart. "Voices from the void, you bring news of currents turned to silence. Our home waters sing no more. Our spawn-givers swim in the eternal deep. How can this be? How can the great ocean die?" The grief in the alien communication was universal and devastating. Elena had to wipe tears from her eyes as she listened to the translations. The Keth Var morning songs that followed were hauntingly beautiful, even filtered through electronic systems. But the tragedy turned to amazement when the aliens fully understood what the humans were telling them. The small water world had visitors. From a distant star system, beings who had intercepted a message never meant for them and traveled impossible distances to help. "Swimmers from the far waters, your currents have carried you through the great void to warn us. You risk your own. Tides to save strangers, the harmony of your hearts echoes across all space." First contact became an exchange of wonders. The humans shared their technology, their art, and their reason for coming. The Keth Var responded with their own marvels: cities that grew like coral reefs, biotechnology that shaped living creatures for specific purposes, and a philosophy that saw all existence as interconnected currents in a vast ocean. Elena took a shuttle down to the planet's surface, accompanied by Dr. Martinez and a small diplomatic team. The landing zone was a floating platform in the middle of one of the planet's vast oceans. As they descended through the atmosphere, Elena saw the true beauty of Keth Var civilization. Underwater cities stretched for kilometers beneath the waves, their organic architecture glowing with bioluminescent lights. Gardens of alien seaweeds swayed in carefully managed currents. Schools of native fish, genetically modified to serve various functions, moved through the water like living tools. The first Keth Var to meet them was an individual called Current Keeper, Flowing Wisdom. Elena had expected something like an earth dolphin, but the reality was far more beautiful. The Keth Var stood nearly 2 meters tall, with elongated limbs that moved with fluid grace. Their skin was covered in patterns that shifted color with their emotions, and their large eyes held an intelligence that was immediately recognizable. "Welcome, swimmers from the distant star," Flowing Wisdom said through a translation device the humans had prepared. "Your arrival brings joy and sorrow in equal measure. Joy that we are not alone in our grief. Sorrow that such beauty as yours should risk itself for such small currents as ours." The formal first contact ceremony took place in the colony's central meeting area, a vast underwater amphitheater where thousands of Keth Var gathered to see the alien visitors. Elena found herself swimming beside beings who had evolved in an entirely different ocean, under a different star, yet their capacity for wonder and gratitude was unmistakably familiar. As the days passed, both species learned about each other with growing amazement. The Keth Var had mastered biotechnology to a degree that seemed like magic to human eyes. They could shape living organisms the way humans shaped metal and plastic. Their cities grew rather than being built, and their tools were living creatures. bred for specific purposes. In return, the humans shared their mechanical technology, their computers, and their weapons. The Keth Var had no concept of warfare in the human sense. Their entire civilization was based on cooperation and harmony with their environment. "How do you fight?" asked Deep Singer Wavecaller, one of the colony's leaders. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Rodriguez, the mission's military advisor, struggled to explain. "We use tools that throw projectiles at high speed, or that release energy in controlled bursts. We have vehicles that can move quickly, and weapons that can destroy large areas." The translation seemed to confuse the aliens. The concept of deliberately destroying things was foreign to their mindset. Dr. Martinez tried a different approach. "Imagine if the coral eaters that threaten your reefs were the size of your cities and could not be reasoned with. How would you protect your young?" This, the Keth Var could understand. They had dealt with natural disasters and predators, though nothing on the scale of the Devourers. The cultural exchange revealed fascinating differences and similarities. The Keth Var had no concept of individual ownership in the human sense. Everything belonged to the community, and decisions were made through a complex process of harmonic consensus that could take days to complete. Their art was entirely musical and kinetic. They created beauty through movement and sound rather than visual representations. Their history was preserved in songs that could last for hours, with mathematical precision encoded in the harmonics. But their capacity for love and sacrifice was immediately recognizable to the humans. When Elena showed them pictures of Earth's children and families, the Keth Var responded with their own images of spawn pools and teaching circles. The universal nature of parental care needed no translation. As the weeks passed, the two species worked together to prepare for the coming threat. The humans shared what they knew about Devourer tactics from the homeworld's final transmission. The Keth Var provided detailed information about their colonies and their limited defensive capabilities. The news was sobering. The three-colony worlds had minimal space-based infrastructure and no weapons capable of fighting the massive Devourer ships. Their only advantages were their mobility in aquatic environments and their advanced biotechnology. "We cannot fight them in space," admitted Deep Current Reef Shaper, the colony's chief engineer. "Our vessels are designed for travel between worlds, not for war, but perhaps we can make ourselves harder to harvest." The Keth Var plan was ingenious in its simplicity. They would use their biotechnology to create massive underwater cities that could move and hide. If they could not fight the Devourers directly, they would make the planet appear lifeless when the enemy arrived. Elena realized that evacuation might not be the only option. "What if we combined our technologies, human weapons with Keth Var mobility and camouflage?" The collaboration that followed produced innovations neither species could have achieved alone. Human fusion drives were integrated with Keth Var bioships to create vessels that were part machine, part living organism. Keth Var energy shields were strengthened with human particle physics. Most importantly, the aliens' natural ability to coordinate movements through harmonic communication was combined with human tactical doctrine. Dr. Chen made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain, the Keth Var harmonic communication isn't just language. It's a form of quantum entanglement. They can coordinate movements across vast distances instantly. This meant that Keth Var forces could act as a single organism, responding to threats and opportunities faster than any human military unit. Combined with human weapons and tactics, it created possibilities that neither species had imagined. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Young current swift swimmer, barely an adult by Keth Var standards, approached Elena with an idea that would change the course of the war. "Elder swimmers, I have been listening to your war songs about the metal fish that throw fire, but what if the fire throwing was not from outside but from within?" The young Keth Var had conceived of biological weapons that could be delivered directly to Devourer ships. living organisms that could survive in space, infiltrate enemy vessels, and cause damage from inside their defenses. Elena stared at the young alien in amazement. "You're talking about turning your biotechnology into weapons." "I speak of defending life by using life itself," Swift Swimmer replied. "The Devourers consume living worlds. Perhaps living weapons can consume them." The ethical implications were staggering. The Keth were peaceful beings who had never created weapons of war. But faced with extinction, they were willing to transform their greatest strength into their defense. Work began immediately on what would later be called the Living Fleet. Human ships were paired with Keth biovessels, creating hybrid craft that combined the best of both technologies. Weapon systems were integrated with living organisms that could repair damage, adapt to threats, and coordinate attacks through quantum harmonics. Most importantly, both species began to understand each other not just as allies, but as friends. Human crew members learned to appreciate the Keth way of seeing all existence as interconnected currents. The aliens marveled at human individualism and the ability to make quick decisions without lengthy consensus building. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, one of the human pilots, found herself particularly close to a young Keth engineer named Bright Current Coral Singer. Despite the language barriers and physical differences, they discovered a shared love of flying and a similar sense of humor that transcended species. "You humans think very fast," Coral Singer observed one day as they worked on integrating a fusion drive with a bioship. "Your thoughts move like storm currents. It is beautiful, but exhausting." Sarah laughed. "You Keth think very deeply. Your thoughts move like deep ocean currents. It's calming but sometimes frustrating when we need quick decisions." These personal connections became the foundation of the alliance. As humans and Keth worked together, ate together, and faced danger together, the bonds between them grew, stronger than any formal treaty. But time was running short. Long-range sensors detected energy signatures at the edge of the system that matched the descriptions from the homeworld's final message. The Devourer fleet was approaching ahead of schedule. Elena called a joint meeting of human and Keth leaders. "We have 18 months instead of 2 years. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." The decision was unanimous. Rather than evacuating, both species would stand and fight. The Keth colonies would become the testing ground for a new kind of warfare, a fusion of human aggression and alien harmony, mechanical precision, and biological adaptation. As the combined fleet prepared for battle, Elena found herself thinking about the message that had started it all. The dying Keth of the homeworld had sent their final transmission into the void, trusting that someone would care enough to listen. Someone had listened. And now, as human and alien ships moved together through the water and space around Keth Var, that trust was about to be tested in the crucible of war. The message that was never meant to be heard had become the foundation of an alliance that neither species could have imagined. Together they would face the darkness coming from the stars, and perhaps together they would find a way to turn that darkness back. The greatest test of both civilizations was about to begin. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the main screen of the UES Harmony as massive crystalline ships, each the size of a city, materialized at the edge of the Keth Var system. The enemy had arrived 3 months early, and they brought more ships than anyone had expected. "Sensor count confirms 73 vessels," reported Dr. Sarah Chen from the science station. "Energy signatures are off the charts. Each ship appears to be a living organism rather than a mechanical construct." Elena felt her stomach drop. The combined human Keth fleet numbered only 15 ships. They were outnumbered nearly 5-1 by an enemy that had already destroyed one advanced civilization. "Captain, we're receiving harmonics from the Keth fleet," announced Lieutenant Commander James Park. "They're broadcasting what Deep Current Reef Shaper calls a current song of unity. They want all ships to join the harmonic pattern." Elena nodded. Over the past 18 months, the human crews had learned to work with Keth Var quantum harmonic communication. It allowed the entire fleet to coordinate movements with perfect precision, acting as a single organism rather than separate ships. All human vessels synchronize with the harmonic pattern. Activate bioship integration protocols. Around Keth Var, the most unusual fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. Human ships merged with Keth Var bio vessels, creating hybrid craft that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. Living armor covered mechanical hulls. Biological weapons systems grew alongside traditional human armaments. The Devourer response was immediate and terrifying. The massive crystalline ships moved toward the planet with predatory grace, their surfaces rippling with energy that seemed to bend space itself around them. As they approached, smaller vessels detached from the main. "Fleet like spores from a fungus." "They're deploying harvester units," Elena observed. "Just like the data from the homeworld described." The harvester ships began scanning the planet with energy beams that penetrated deep into the ocean. They were looking for signs of life to consume. But the Keth Var had spent months preparing for this moment. "Initiate Camouflage Protocol 7, Elena ordered. Across the planet's surface, Keth Var biocities began to change. Bioluminescent lights dimmed to nothing. Living structures contracted and hid beneath artificial rock formations. Entire populations of aliens moved into deep ocean trenches where the scanning beams could not reach them. To the Devourer sensors, Keth Var appeared to be a dead world. The confusion among the enemy fleet was immediate. Harvester ships circled the planet repeatedly, their scanning beams finding nothing but empty water and lifeless rock. The massive command vessels held position, apparently waiting for their scouts to locate the civilization they knew should be there. "Now," Elena whispered. The attack began from every direction at once. Human Keth Var hybrid ships erupted from hidden positions in asteroid fields, on the dark side of moons, and from the planet's deep ocean trenches. The harmonically coordinated assault hit the Devourer fleet at its most vulnerable moment, when they were spread out and focused on planetary scanning rather than defense. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, now piloting a fusion of her fighter craft and a Keth Var bioship called Bright Current, led the first wave. Her ship moved through space with organic fluidity, its living hull adapting to energy weapons and its biological systems repairing damage faster than the Devourers could inflict it. "Multiple hits on Target 7, Sarah reported as her weapons. A combination of human particle cannons and Keth Var bioenergy projectors tore through a harvester ship's crystalline armor. "The living weapons are working. They're adapting to their defenses. The bioweapons were the key innovation of the Human Keth Var Alliance. Unlike mechanical weapons that fired the same way every time, these living projectiles could change their approach, learn from enemy countermeasures, and find new ways to penetrate defenses. But the Devourers adapted quickly. The massive command. Ships began targeting the hybrid vessels with focused energy beams that could vaporize a city block. Several human Keth Var ships were destroyed in the opening minutes of battle. "We're losing ships faster than we can replace them," reported Colonel Marcus Rodriguez from the UES Defiance. "We need a new strategy." The answer came from an unexpected source. Young current swift swimmer, the Keth Var who had conceived the EAS bioweapons, was aboard one of the hybrid ships when it was critically damaged by Devourer fire. As the ship's systems failed, Swift Swimmer made a desperate decision. "All currents converge," the young alien broadcast on the Harmonic network. "Living ship, carry my song to the deep waters of the enemy." Swift Swimmer merged completely with the damaged bioship, transforming it into something unprecedented. A living missile with a consciousness to guide it. The ship creature flew directly into the largest Devourer vessel, penetrating its defenses not through force but through biological infiltration. Once inside, Swift Swimmer's consciousness spread through the enemy ship's organic systems like a beneficial virus. The Devourer vessel began to turn against its own fleet, its weapons targeting other crystalline ships. "By all the depths," whispered Current Keeper, flowing wisdom from the planet's surface. "Swift Swimmer has become one with the enemy ship. The young one swims in hostile currents to protect us all." The sacrifice inspired both species. Across, the fleet human and Keth High crews began attempting similar infiltration attacks. Ships that were too damaged to continue fighting became guided projectiles, their crews using escape pods while biocomponents attempted to infect enemy vessels. But the Devourers learned from each attack. Their later ships developed biological defenses that made infiltration nearly impossible. The battle was turning into a grinding war of attrition that the smaller fleet could not win. Elena realized they needed a decisive action. "All ships, form up for the Chen maneuver." The Chen maneuver was named after Dr. Sarah Chen, who had discovered that Devourer ships used their own momentum and energy against enemies. But that same momentum could be turned into a weakness if approached correctly. The entire human Keth High fleet grouped together and accelerated directly toward the largest concentration of enemy ships. To the Devourers, it appeared to be a desperate suicide charge. They focused all their firepower on the approaching fleet, pouring energy into what should have been an easy target. At the last moment, the harmonic coordination allowed the Allied fleet to scatter in perfect synchronization. But instead of fleeing, they used the Devourer's own energy beams as a slingshot effect, redirecting the massive amounts of energy back at the enemy ships. The results were devastating. 3 Devourer command vessels were destroyed by their own redirected weapons. The massive crystalline structures, designed to project energy outward, could not handle the feedback when their beams were reflected back at them. "It's working!" shouted Lieutenant Park from the communications station. "They're vulnerable to their own weapons." But the victory came at a terrible cost. The maneuver required ships to pass dangerously close to enemy fire, and many human Keth High vessels were destroyed in the process. The fleet that had started with 15 ships was down to 7. The remaining Devourer ships, now numbering about 40, began to regroup. Their tactics shifted from overwhelming force to patient siege. They surrounded Keth Var at a distance, cutting off any possibility of escape while they developed new strategies to deal with the unexpected resistance. "They're going to wait us out," Elena realized. "They know we can't maintain this level of fighting indefinitely." The siege lasted for 3 weeks. During this time, both sides tried to gain advantage through innovation and adaptation. The Devourers developed new scanning techniques that could penetrate the Keth High camouflage. The Allies created new bioweapons that could operate independently in space, but the breakthrough came from an unlikely source, the original message that had started everything. Dr. Martinez, working with Keth High harmonic specialists, made a discovery about the quantum nature of their communication. "Captain, what if we could broadcast the homeworld's final message using the harmonic network, but amplified through our ship systems?" "What would that accomplish?" Elena asked. "The message contains the mathematical and emotional essence of Keth High civilization. If we could project it with enough power, it might disrupt the Devourer's coordination. They're silicon-based life forms. They might be vulnerable to biological quantum patterns." It was a desperate idea with little scientific basis, but they were running out of options. The remaining fleet gathered around Keth Var's largest moon, preparing for what would likely be their final battle. Elena stood on the bridge as the Devourer fleet began its final approach. 40 massive ships moved toward the planet with inexorable purpose, their crystalline hulls glowing with contained energy. "Begin harmonic broadcast," she ordered. The message that had never been meant for human ears now filled space around Keth Var. But this time, it was not a desperate plea for help. It was a declaration of defiance. The mathematical beauty and emotional depth of Keth High civilization, amplified by human technology and projected through bioship harmonic networks, created a wave of organized information that washed over the approaching fleet. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and unexpected. Their tight formation began to break apart as individual ships lost coordination with the fleet. The quantum harmonics that bound their collective intelligence together were disrupted by the alien patterns of thought and emotion. "Now!" Elena shouted. "All ships attack pattern swift swimmer!" The remaining 7 human Keth High vessels charged the confused enemy fleet. Without their coordination, the Devourer ships were vulnerable in ways they had never experienced. Individual vessels were picked off by coordinated attacks that exploited gaps in their defenses. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. The bioweapons, no longer facing organized resistance, spread through the enemy fleet like a plague. Ships that had seemed invincible began turning against each other as their organic systems were compromised. Captain Elena Vasquez found herself leading a charge against the largest Devourer command ship. Her vessel, the Harmony, had been extensively modified with Keth High biotechnology. As they approached the enemy vessel, she could feel the ship's living components responding to her emotions, growing stronger with her determination to protect the innocents below. "For swift swimmer," she whispered as the Harmony's biocannons tore through the crystalline armor of the command ship. "For the home world, for everyone who trusted the universe to care." The command ship's destruction sent cascading failures through the remaining Devourer fleet. Without their central coordination, the remaining vessels either fled the system or were destroyed by the relentless bioweapon infections. When the last enemy ship disappeared into hyperspace, Keth Var was free. The victory celebration that followed brought together humans and Keth High in ways that neither species had expected. In the underwater cities of the planet, human survivors swam alongside their alien allies, sharing stories of the battle and mourning their dead together. Elena found herself floating in a vast underwater chamber, surrounded by thousands of Keth High, whose patterns of bioluminescence created a living light show of gratitude and joy. The ceremony was both alien and completely familiar, the universal expression of beings who had survived against impossible odds. "The current has carried us through the darkest deep," sang Current Keeper Flowing Wisdom. "The swimmers from distant waters have become part of our eternal flow. In all the vast ocean of space, we are no longer alone." Dr. Martinez, floating, nearby in her breathing gear, translated for the humans present. But translation was hardly necessary. The meaning was clear in the harmonic patterns that filled the water around them. As the celebrations continued, reports began arriving from the other Keth High colonies. The victory at Keth Var had accomplished more than just saving one world. The bioweapons had spread beyond the immediate battle, carried by fleeing Devourer ships to other parts of their fleet. The alien plague designed by peaceful beings was systematically destroying the galaxy's greatest threat. Within months, reports came from across the galaxy of Devourer fleets simply disappearing. The living weapons continued to adapt and spread, turning the Devourer's own biological nature against them. The message that was never meant to be heard had become the salvation not just of the Keth High, but of countless other species across the galaxy. The mathematical harmonics and emotional patterns of a dying civilization had provided the key to defeating an enemy that had seemed invincible. But perhaps more importantly, the battle had proven something about the nature of intelligence and compassion in the universe. When beings chose to help strangers at great personal cost, when they combined their strengths to protect the innocent, when they turned love and sacrifice into weapons against darkness, the universe itself seemed to respond. Elena stood on the bridge of the Harmony, now permanently merged with its Keth High biocomponents, and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other civilizations faced their own challenges and threats. And somewhere out there, the echo of the Keth High message continued to spread, not just as a warning, but as a promise. In a vast and sometimes cruel galaxy, someone was always listening, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, they were willing to answer with everything they had. The defense of Keth Var was over, but the legacy of the message that was never meant to be heard would continue forever, a reminder that hope could travel faster than light, and that love could triumph over any darkness.